think he's either not doing a good job or you think you could do better. So, you know, that would be your question. So, Mike, do you want to start?
Right. So the primary reason I'm running for re-election to the office is because we have made good progress. We have seen good improvements throughout the community. We've made improvements in a number of areas, right? With apparatus funding for the fire department, making sure that we have appropriate staffing for firefighters and paramedics, making sure they have the tools and the resources and equipment they need. Same thing with the police staffing. We're continuing to increase the police staffing and make sure they have the support they need. We've doubled our efforts in street repairs and maintenance, and we're starting to see the improvements of that. It took a while to get there. That's part of that ongoing budget process, but we made the sacrifice in both the general fund as well as with the $20 transportation benefit district car tab tax to increase the support, you know, for the streets and roads to make those improvements. We're making the improvements in this area. We have the best parks now than we've ever seen before. We have some of the best recreation programs than we've ever seen before. Our community, and Longview specifically, is a leader in the region in these areas. We've preserved the library. Yes, we had some bumpy roads along the way when it comes to the budget process and the budget cycle to balance all the needs. That's one of the difficult parts of this job, is to balance the needs and the priorities with what our wants and desires are. It's a bumpy road through that process every 2 years, but we're able to preserve the values that we have. We've done a good job, and we're making improvements. As you can see, the evidence of the improvements all around the community.
John?
Well, first of all, for those that don't know, I retired last July, and now a year ago July, and I have an opportunity after 38 years to serve my community. My background is engineering and project management and maintenance, and I think my skill sets, working with budgets and working with people, will be a key thing to help the city in the future. I also I believe in something called the public trust, and I think when the community elects officials, they expect them to be fair, honest, respectful, and transparent, and I don't think that Mike has done that. And so consequently, I think that there's a need for change. Also, I absolutely believe in an independent council, 7 members of the council, and I don't agree with people running as a slate. And lastly, like I said, I've retired, so I've got the time, the interest, the willingness to commit to this town and hopefully help draw it into the future.
When you talk about, I might get a chance to respond to that in a minute, but you talked about transparency and fairness. What specifically are you concerned about?
So there's a number of issues, and it has to do with Mike's understanding of the role. There's a difference in the role of city council and city manager. Mike's role is not to be one out there, and I'll give some specific examples. So Mike goes online and he takes and criticizes and demeans and calls for firing of people in the city. Everything I know about leadership, and I've got a lot of experience in it, says that is absolutely wrong, and to me that's unacceptable. I believe that you praise in public and you deal with performance issues in private. In this case, it would be executive session. It's just not right to go and do that, and I think that it has had a negative impact on the city. I think it's caused a brain drain, and when there's people that are leaving the city because they're intimidated and feel like that they are, it's not a friendly place to work and not a good place to work, that's a problem because the city has to go out and rehire people. I absolutely believe in high standards. I think that's a good thing, but how you go about that is so critical. There's coaching, mentoring, and there's executive session to deal with performance issues. And there's the city manager who has that responsibility to deal with those performance issues. It's not Mike's responsibility to deal with that. So those are key things that I think are so important. And there's a number of other issues. There's the housing authority issue that came up, and Mike was, in my mind, not transparent about what the issues are. Still don't understand, quite frankly, why he went after the housing authority and used the term inefficient. And that caused such an uproar. That The director of that organization was a statewide, nationally recognized individual. The board had done a good job, and then just to arbitrarily say, I want to replace the entire board without some more transparent discussion about what the issues were is not right. So,
Mike, you got a lot to respond to there, so go ahead.
Well, with respect, John, your opinion is based on gossip and not facts. Gossip. You don't know the facts. You weren't involved. There might be a point made about transparency. Many of the conversations, particularly concerning staffing, are done between the city manager, the HR professional, the executive management team, in closed-door session with council. We cannot disclose and discuss those things publicly. There is a fine line. John's right. In a city council manager form of government, there's a separation of powers between what the council can do and what the manager does, right? It's pretty clear. We pass ordinances, resolutions, proclamations, give direction to the manager and his staff through our budget process and through those directives, right? It's up to the manager to do all the other activities. The staff are not leaving the city with any other propensity than what any other community is facing in our state or across the country. We have a tough time in certain areas, just like any other community does, right? Many of our staff are very happy with the city and very happy working with the city. We have a great relationship with the executive management team. Look, John talked about the housing opportunities of Southwest Washington. The statute spells out what the reasons are why you would propose removing a board member from a position like that. What happened was a member of council at the time violated council rules, disclosed an internal communication, violating council rules, violating our rules of decorum, and shared with the public information that was happening behind closed doors, so to speak, about the conversation with our relationship with the mayor's appointed Longview Housing Authority Board, the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington. We had ongoing conversations the 2 years prior to try to have a course correction at Longview Housing Authority, the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington, so that they would invest in Longview and put Longview first. They had been investing elsewhere, their time, their efforts, their capital elsewhere. And the council and our community, it was hungry for housing. And you can see it to this day with our housing crisis. And we wanted the Housing Authority and our board to focus on Longview. And we had a number of workshops, we had meetings to get together on the subject, and we tried to get that course correction. And they were unwilling. And they're unable. And so we asked if they're not willing to serve the residents of Longview, that they would remove themselves from the board and we would appoint people who were. In almost 1 year's time, we've almost completely removed the board and replaced the board. We now have a board at Longview Housing Authority, Longview's Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington, with local board members who put Longview first and who are focusing on projects and development and housing opportunities in Longview. Yes, they have very successful programs. They always had. They had awesome, amazing leadership prior. And we do today too. We have an amazing board, we have an amazing leadership team there, and they're doing a good job. They do an amazing job with the HUD rental vouchers, they do a good job with the Veterans Integration Program and other programs they're doing. But we want the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington to do is invest in Longview. Our criticism was their divestment of Longview. They sold housing in Longview to pay for executive office buildings and to invest in other communities. That's wrong. And we had public meetings and public workshops on this issue and asked them for a course correction, and they would not make a change. And so we went to them, the mayor and myself, and it became very public because a member of council decided to make this a political move, right? They decided to expose something. Council has rules on how we do business, and they exposed it to cap us at the knee when we had a plan to work with the appointed members of this board to try to get a course correction to get them to focus on Longview. And it became a very bumpy road. Immediately we saw a course correction. Immediately they took note that we meant what we meant, and that was that we expected a focus on Longview. Since then, by the way, we've increased our cooperation. We're collaborating. We've been able to get money from the state of Washington, from the state capital budget for the purpose of the Park Place Apartments, for Community House on Broadway with their outreach center and others, because of our collaboration, because we fixed what was broken previously. It was a bumpy road. I give you that. But it took that leadership. I've been challenged about my leadership. It took that leadership. We had to say enough was enough. We have to focus on Longview. And yes, I'm very public on the social media, Facebook and Instagram and that kind of thing. Our residents expect that. We have many politicians who hide from the public, who don't do town halls, who don't show up to this or that. They expect and they want politicians and their elected officials to be visible and accessible and responsive. That's the expectation. And sometimes it does come off a little critical if only you're looking for that. If that's your focus and you just want to focus in on what's negative. But as the reporters know who regularly attend council meetings and who follow along and who've been more than just a couple of meetings, they know that we actually give great praise to our staff. We have a great staff. They do tremendous work. They're often very responsive, and we've seen success. And so I would suggest, and I think the record will show, that our praise for our staff far outweighs our criticism. We have some of the best performing departments and the best performance in some of the areas of the city than we've ever seen before. And we have what now is skullduggery, election year politicking, focusing on these little tiny, minute things.
I just find it
try to keep it short. We have other things to move on.
I just find it ironic that in 1 minute you're calling for a firing of a city employee, and the next minute you're saying I praise them all the time. It doesn't bode well with me.
The record shows it. The record shows it.
You do both. That's right, and that's unacceptable.
Okay. Who wants to grab the next question?
I have questions unless you guys want to go.
Well, since we have a lot of passion already, let's just go for that. So one of the things John mentioned was that there was an issue with honesty. I would like if you could elaborate on that a little bit, and then Mike, if you could respond to that. Here's the thing. Let's face it. The election is about it's about who's going to get the job done. One, we start with someone else getting it done, or someone that's already there. So for the voters, it's almost like discrimination. It's the voters saying, well, we're not going to have you do this. You got to do that for me. You hear me? They heard it. Oh, okay. So the point is, let's just touch on those type of things. We have some thoughts, but I think that's important to deal with those particular, that one particular thing is the honesty question.
Honesty.
You threw that out, and
Sure,
I say
sure.
you can't just let that one go.
Another example is there is a process for putting people on boards and commissions. And there is a timeline to put your applications in, and there is then there's a review process by different people, and then final decision on who gets on that board. Mike chose to ignore timelines and put people that on some of those boards that did not meet those timelines. And then when he was asked about it in a city council meeting, he said no, we had interviewed all the board members or all the applicants, and that wasn't true. So you just cannot. You've got to be honest about things. And if you did not interview people, you should have said that, and you should say why those people that didn't meet the timeline for putting their applications, why should they possibly even be considered? And I believe it's because you wanted your people, the people that you know and you felt comfortable with on those boards, even though they didn't meet that timeline.
More gossip. You weren't involved. You weren't showing up. You weren't paying attention. You had never attended any meetings. None of this is firsthand information for you. You have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, I do want the best qualified people on these boards and commissions to be appointed. And yes, I would love people who agree with me. That's not the case. Not everyone does. And so we do reach out. And the way it works, right, is there is timelines. They're set by resolution. The staff, by the way, in this council-managed form of government, the manager staff is responsible for bringing these timelines to the council and saying, we need to do this. Then the manager staff, they are responsible for advertising the positions. Then they are responsible for soliciting the applications. Council gets involved with reaching out to our spheres of influence and inviting our friends, inviting our neighbors, inviting people that we've heard from in the community, and inviting them to apply. All the applications come in, staff reviews them all, collates them and puts them all together based on which positions they applied for, their qualifications, their availability. They bring it to a subcommittee. There's a subcommittee of the mayor pro tem, which is the position that I serve in, and another member of council. That subcommittee meets, reviews all the information provided by staff based on the timelines that staff follows through and provides to the subcommittee. Subcommittee reviews them all and then interviews them all. Yes, the work is divided up. Phone calls are made, in-person visits are made. Staff, the directors meet with the persons and make recommendations that someone should be reappointed or appointed based on their level of interest. It's not one member of council or one member of staff, but it's this collaborative effort. As an example, the community development director talks to the planning commission members. Do you wish to be reappointed? Do you want to continue your work? Or if not, or the downtown advisory committee, so on. The staff people who are the liaisons, so to speak, working on that issue, make recommendations, conduct the interviews, make a report back and a recommendation. Council doesn't always agree with that. What happens is the subcommittee reviews all this, puts together a list of recommendations to the council, and then some are mayor appointments, some are manager with council approval appointments, some are council appointments. The recommendation from the committee goes back to the council. Yes, timelines are missed. I wish it were different. That would avoid one more criticism, right? It's largely out of our control. Sometimes you don't have applicants. Sometimes there's an abundance of applicants, right? This is something we could improve on. That relationship, the timeline, the communication, there could be some improvement made there. We have highly functioning boards and commissions that are getting real work done. Mr. Melink and others challenge about the multiple appointments. Well, Mr. Melink, if he would read and understand and show up and knew what he was talking about, he would see that some committees require representation on numerous appointments. For example, the Downtown Advisory Committee requires that a person represent small or medium or large business or different interest groups. The Project Longview Committee requires that someone be from the Parks Commission, the Parks Recreation Advisory Board. So there's multiple areas of overlap. And some of them require that overlap. Some of them it just makes good sense, and sometimes the applicants are just a good fit for these multiple roles. I would ask, the challenge should be how well and how successful are those committees doing, those boards and commissions, and how successful and what are their results. Let's test and measure the results of those appointments, not necessarily the process. I apologize that timelines were missed. I wish I had better control of it. That is something we can improve. That would be something we can improve.
Criticism is you ignored for the applicants, there's a deadline to put it in. You chose people that had missed that deadline over people that had already made the deadline. They had met the process, and you discounted those people and selected people that had missed the deadline. That's the criticism.
Should we start the process over?
You should only consider the applicants that were...
Oh, no, absolutely not. We should have the most qualified people for these...
So then why have a timeline?
I would question that.
Why not just open it up forever?
We basically do as it is now.
Appoint whoever.
We basically do that now. What happens is there's open recruitment, if you will. If there's a vacancy on a board or commission or committee, it's open recruit. If somebody, as an example right now, there's a vacancy on the Library Board of Trustees. We're looking for someone to serve in there. We have an opening on the Accessibility Disability Advisory Committee for someone with disability, right? It's an open recruitment. We're not going to wait till the end of the year for a process. If somebody comes forward and they're qualified and they're passionate and they're interested and they're ready, willing, and able to serve and show up, we will gladly take them. And we want the best people.
I can understand that. I can't understand when there has been a formal process and the applicants have all come in and they met the deadline and then...
Yep. So John has criticism about the council manager form of government and the role of council versus manager. Take it up with the manager and take it up with his staff.
Okay, I think we talked a lot about kind of approach to the job and then leadership qualities and all that. So let's talk a little bit about initiatives in the city. So what are your top sort of 3 priorities that you want to achieve if you are elected? And obviously I know that there's some things that you agree on already, like the 5 police officers. So if there's something that you see as a stance that you have that's different from the other, perhaps we can talk about that more. So.
And if you've got to go, how are you going to achieve it?
Yeah.
So everybody wants, $1 million for everybody, but how are you going to do it? So.
And I think Mike started, so perhaps John.
I have to get ready for the page one still. So we can stay here. You guys are both making good points, but I have to get moving on.
Thank you.
Okay, Ross. My number 1 priority is economic development. This community, ever since we lost Reynolds, we lost, although it's across the river, Trojan, we lost pulp and paper and timber jobs, we've lost family wage jobs. It is so critical to have a healthy community and a thriving community to make sure that we have family wage jobs. So getting and attracting new businesses, small businesses, diverse businesses, and medium-sized businesses is critical. And I know Mike and I both support both the Pacific Coast fertilizer plant and also the methanol plant. And that's good. That's good. So getting economic development allows us to go after other things that are important to our community. And areas probably that we differ are on homelessness. I do not subscribe to what I think Mike's approach has been, is essentially to do nothing. Homelessness, to me, going after tarps, going after making the lake illegal to be in one place, or addressing shopping carts, is not addressing the issue that we have in front of us. I believe firmly that it's not acceptable to have people in the park. It's not acceptable to have them in front of City Hall. It's not acceptable in front of the library. But we have to determine as a community, as Longview, Kelso, and county, to say where is acceptable on a short-term basis that these people can be, so that they can get the help that they need and not be spread out all over the community and cause disruption throughout the community. So I think that is probably a difference. And then again, economic development, increasing your tax base, that allows us to go after things on not only homelessness but also on infrastructure. We've got a city that's 100 years old. You guys, I commend you for the work that you're doing on sidewalks and streets. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
We need to continue doing that.
Thank you.
But we also have issues that the city can benefit from, but we want to continue to make Longview an attractive place for people to come. That means it's got to be safe. So again, we both support the addition of police. I think we both have questions about how do we fund that, because it absolutely does not make sense to hire these people and then 2 years or 3 years later, after grant money runs out, that you can't afford them and you're laying them off. So, and I think what we in the city with a $39 million budget, we find ourselves stuck in trying to how to meet all the mouths that need to be fed. And so there's a little bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing going on. And so that's yet another reason why getting more tax base is important. And then there's the quality of the place that we live. Longview is a great place. It's really, in my mind, a diamond in the rough. There's so many good things. We've got a community college. We've got 4 theaters. We've got the downtown section that's been the streetscape project that has revitalized the city. We got hunting, fishing. We got recreation. We got all kinds of great things in this community. But we also have to make sure that we are addressing that crime issue, because businesses and also people don't want to live in communities that they feel either unsafe or that have a bad perception. And I think outside of Longview, there is a perception that Longview has issues. And that's probably why some of the professionals don't locate here, some of the teachers don't locate here, and so we need to continue to work on those problems by making sure we have adequate police and fire for the city.
I appreciate your comments. John probably is the best campaigner for me than myself, maybe, because he just highlighted many of the things that we're doing successfully, that we've been improving upon, that we have results, and you can see it. And I appreciate your acknowledgement for some of those. That means a lot to me, because we have made significant progress in many of these areas. My most important role is to effectively balance our budget and our needs. And it's pretty broad. And I listed in the questionnaire that you sent kind of the departments and making sure that we can feed the many mouths, I think, as John had said. And there are many needs, and we have to balance those competing needs and priorities. And that is a serious challenge. And we have huge commitments that we have to fulfill. In the short term, we're going to have to build another fire station. We have to build a Station 83. And we have to continue to fund and pay for that apparatus and that equipment. That's an extremely high priority, right? In the public safety regard, also the police staffing that we've been talking about. Now, it shows John's lack of knowledge in this area, though. So we have been planning on how to pay for the police and how to budget for the police and how to staff the police. And again, the manager and the human resource director and the department are managing the allocation of the resources that have been budgeted to them. And they're planning through attrition, through retirement, through leave. They understand what it takes, because we've authorized overhire If the department can hire police, we allow them to hire police because we know that there's attrition and retirement and changes in staffing that are ongoing in nature. Yes, we would love to get some more resources, and we've applied for it and we've been successful time and time again in getting grants from the Department of Justice. I've made several visits to Washington to meet with Department of Justice with the COPS program myself, and we've been really good and we've been successful. That speaks to our high functioning council and our relationships, by the way. We have exceptional relationships with our congressional delegation, both U.S. senators and with the congresswoman as well, and our lobbyist team and our state legislators in the area. We are high functioning, high performing in this area of cooperation and working together to get these things done. That's how we've been able to be successful in getting the Beach Street grant and getting the COP grant and getting the domestic violence assistant grants and so on. It's a little bit bigger picture, right? But balancing all these things is difficult, and we have a process. I mentioned, you asked for specific goals, right? One thing that we don't do that I'd like to see a little differently is we adopt a budget that's a 2-year budget, but it doesn't precisely line up and match with what we call our strategic initiatives and goals and measurable deliverables and what we call the work plan. The work plan is what council puts together with the manager, and the manager puts together for his staff and his departments on what the expectations are to get done over the course of time. What we would like to see, and where I would like to go and as a goal, would be to marry and match that work plan with our strategic goals and initiatives with the budget cycle, so that our budget actually fulfills what our goals and objections and deliverables in a strategic way are. We could do so much better if we did that, and I think we're close to doing that. We agree in many ways on the economic climate and on encouraging economic development. The difference is I've been doing it. Time and time again, I have been the leader in the area for economic development. Working with our local, we have what's called the revolving loan fund at the city, where we're a partner with the Economic Development Administration and the Council of Governments. We've been able to help restaurants get started, small breweries get started, truck shops and truck repairs get started. We helped Big C metal fab get started. We've been helping small and medium-sized businesses get started through the city revolving loan fund, through the help and cooperation of the Economic Development Administration and the Council of Governments and the Southwest Washington Economic Development District. We have been successful. We also have a full-time economic development coordinator who's working around the clock to help recruit and attract and retain businesses, to help increase the number of industrial and commercial taxpayers and ratepayers. We've been successful in attracting investment. Now, huge announcement just last week from the Economic Development Administration for the funding to do the Beach Street project. That we could see massive development there. That's not just narrowly focused on the mint farm. It is about diversifying the economy. It is about building resilience. This is not new. We're working on it. We have a record of success. We've been getting things done. I'm glad that John is interested, and I'm glad that he's also passionate in this area because it is a priority. I appreciate the recognition for that. I've been doing it. I have a record of success in doing it. These are just pictures of me at events. At all the public hearings we've had, John's never been there. At all the times that we've had public hearings and workshops and meetings, planning for SR 411, 432, the interchange, all these things for strategic freight mobility, freight planning, he's not been there, not helpful. All these fresh new ideas, where have they been? We could have used some ideas possibly along the way. Look, we're doing the best we can. We continue to improve. We have a record of improvement. We also, I believe, need to build, and this speaks a little bit, I appreciate comments about the trust and transparency and that kind of thing, because that's important to me too. I would like our city government to have a customer-focused, a customer-centered way of doing business that treats our residents and ratepayers like customers, that treats them with the respect that they're due, that respects the tax dollars and the ratepayer dollars in a way that is friendly to them and welcoming to them and respectful to them, delivers the services that they expect in a timely manner, in an efficient manner, an effective manner.
Is that not true now?
We continue to improve on it, right? We have an amazing building and planning department, community development. Many rave about how well their experience is at our permit counter, right? There are other areas where we can make improvements, and we continue to. We want people to be proud of their city too. And John spoke about a number of great things in our community. We're going to continue to build on those things.
Well, you touched on homelessness and obviously the discussion about about severe weather shelters is already starting up. Temperatures are already dropping, so we're already in that debate. And there's been a proposal for a church on Kessler Boulevard. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on the proposal, and then sort of more broadly, what can we do about homelessness? And since you started last time, I'll start with Mike.
I'm glad you asked again, because John made some comments about homelessness, and again, he's just not paying attention, not showing up, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. Look, we have reduced utility rates for our shelters, for Community House on Broadway, Salvation Army, Emergency Support Shelter. We made it easier for them to get by because the costs are going up, the cost of living is going up, the cost of doing business is going up. We worked with our partners to find a way to reduce their cost of utilities, right? By example, we have an annual process that we work in collaboration with the HUD, CDBG, and home programs to allocate federal resource grant dollars to programs through a request for proposal process that is open, that is transparent, in which we allocate funding to CAP, Habitat for Humanity, LifeWorks, and others. This is ongoing. There is ongoing efforts for programs and services that work, that show and demonstrate results, from group homes to shelter facilities, to rehab housing, on and on. There is success all across the community, and they're doing good work. The city cannot be responsible for everything. That is true. We rely on these nonprofits, these social service providers, and partners in the community who are successful and who have good programs to be partners with us. Again, we have a council manager form of government where council gives direction, manager and his staff execute these policies, these plans, the procedures, the request for proposals. They come in for council review and approval. Very public process, right? And if John were attending meetings and he were showing up, he would know how this works. But we're investing a tremendous amount in helping homeless individuals, unhoused people, and others. Low-income households, seniors, and the disabled. It's a tremendous amount of support in our community. We have one of the most generous communities. Look all around.
You're not talking about the city, you're talking about a general sort of communal effort.
Right.
Okay.
So there is what we can do. CDBG, home, document recording fees. We have a pot of dollars that we can use for this purpose. On the other side of the balance sheet, we have to focus on law enforcement, police, fire, streets. There's many needs, competing needs. Thankfully, on our legislative agenda, we were supporting the Association of Washington Cities in the effort to get some relief from the state legislature back to cities and counties. We were successful in getting, and this shows our council shows up. They go to Olympia, we testify, we go to meetings, we meet with our legislature and our legislators, and we were successful in getting House Bill 1406 passed at the legislature. This returns some of our sales tax dollars back to our communities. And so we're going to have about $70,000 approximately come back to the city of Longview in the next year in a sales tax rebate that is specifically targeted to help homeless people of low income. And we are planning right now, as soon as it was passed, we're kicking off, we passed a resolution, we're going to be adopting an ordinance, putting together the plans in place to use these dollars to help people locally because it's a brand new tool. We didn't have that tool previously. I would love to be doing more. We're using the tools we have available to us.
And what about specifically the Kessler Boulevard proposal? I know there's already been people complaining about it. What's your opinion on that?
I am thankful that we have a group of volunteers and individuals who step up who want to provide severe weather sheltering, but it is the worst place imaginable to do it. It is the worst place imaginable to do it. And I hope and I pray that an alternative will be found and that someone else will step up and that another location will be provided. At the end of the day, though, we have to get by with what we have, and we're going to have to make it the least impactful if, in fact, it goes forward, and if their doors are open, we'll have to do everything we can to make it the least impactful to the neighborhood and to the preschoolers and to the elementary schoolers and to the parents who drop off and pick up and all the people who enjoy that area, and to serve the individuals that are intended to be served by that shelter. We'll have to do the best we can until someone else steps up. And my hope is that there will be another agency or another group or another location that is suggested. And by the way, the county has a task force and we have a subcommittee. The council has a subcommittee that meets on a regular basis on this issue, and we have a member of council who's part of a county task force that almost anyone could join. And I understand Mr. Melink attended his first meeting just last week. That's been ongoing for years on the 10-year plan, on the 5-year plan, fulfilling the requirements from Department of Commerce. These are not new. This is ongoing. It's nice to have additional interest, but But we are continuing to improve in these areas and continuing to fund and to help and be supportive and encourage those who are doing a good job.
Yeah.
First of all, just a correction. It wasn't my first meeting. I've been to numerous ones now. So, second point is the council, last year we had a severe weather issue that came up. I think Councilman Wallin asked for Love Overwhelming to help out in that process. They did it, but then when it got to providing just a small $9,000, the council could not come up with that. And this is an emergency. This isn't just, this is severe weather, people's lives are at risk, and you couldn't come up with $9,000. Now, this year, so what the council did is they turned it over to the churches. Hey, churches, how about you guys providing this service? How about you getting involved in this? And there's 14 ministerial churches that have been involved in this. They've come up with a plan. They looked at different alternatives. They reached out to the commissioners to use a place at the fairgrounds, and they were denied. Don't know how many other alternatives that they came up with, but ultimately they came up with a place. I agree 100%. It is an issue associated with it being next to the school. However, is it insurmountable? Can the city not provide some police protection? If that is the only location that we can find, and I'd love to have some other alternatives, but if there haven't been coming up, then that should be a place, and we should figure out how do we make it work. We shouldn't just throw our hands up and say, no, this is not acceptable, and we're going to let these people sit out on the streets. You find solutions. Another solution is, how about, because what they said is it's only for nighttime, and at 7 a.m. they're going to be transported to other locations in the city. How about the city stepping up? It's an emergency, and we provide a bus to transport them over to this other spot. Let's not just throw our hands up and say we can't solve this problem. And that's the problem with this issue. We got people, this is an emergency. If you had an emergency, or your family had an emergency, and you would hope that somebody in the city would be there to help on the issue. And so I disagree with this, and I don't think we can just put our heads in the sand and say, I hope the problem goes away. Because it's not. Homelessness is a nationwide problem, it's a statewide problem, it's a community problem. And it's not gonna, it's very complex, and there's no silver bullet to solve the problem, and it's gonna be a challenge. But you can't ignore the problem. You got to come up with a plan. You got to address it in some way, shape, or form that is acceptable to the community.
I agree.
I absolutely agree with many of those comments, and that's underway, and that's happening. And we have a county task force working on it, and we have a council subcommittee working on it. And for the first time in Longview's history, council adopted and funded $18,000 in the biennial budget, $9,000 in each year to help with severe weather sheltering. And we gave that authority to the city manager. And in a council manager form of government, the council adopts the budget, adopts the policy, gives direction to the manager, and the manager administrates the staff and executes the decisions. Again, Mr. Melink is not following along. He doesn't understand the way it works. He wasn't there, wasn't paying attention, and he's basing his opinion based on some gossip that he heard. The council had no influence over the funding, the actual allocation of resources. Those are staff decisions. Those are administrative and executive decisions that are made by the city manager's office. We funded for the first time ever the ability to do that. And we asked that a shelter would be a good neighbor, that they would clean up for those in the premises around their shelter site, that they would work with the neighbors to make sure safety and security concerns were addressed. And many council members, by the way, volunteered to help feed, to clothe, to bring blankets, donated, etc. On and on. How dare you accuse this council for not being involved? Because you weren't there. This council has been involved every step of the way. And this council, every member of this council, is involved in many ways, whether it's on the Salvation Army Board and giving, or whether it's showing up to LO to give clothing or toiletries or food, or whether it's feeding at one of the feeding places. This council is very passionate. And if Mr. Melink were showing up and had he been paying attention and had he been involved, he would know that. This community is very generous. Yes, we're going to work together and find a solution that works best for everyone with the least amount of impacts. Unfortunately, the proposal that's before us now came at the 11th hour. Council was not involved in the process. We didn't get any input along the way. Thankfully, there is a public forum that's going to happen next week where people can air their concerns and hear what the plan is. That'll be the first time that council hears the plan too. It'll be nice to have that information and to be included before there is an emergency. We have time to resolve this. We also have time to find an alternate location if that's what's needed. At the end of the day, there will be a location found. At the end of the day, there will be a place that is organized, there will be an opportunity, there will be an organized effort, and the community will come together united to support a severe weather shelter that helps those who need to get out of the inclement weather. That will happen. Prior to having an emergency, the community will come together again. And that's what we do. You can see that throughout our community. Sometimes we struggle, and sometimes it's a bumpy road. At the end of the day, we come together, and this community sticks together pretty strong. And it shows.
Okay. No, you asked the question I was going to ask.
Does anybody else have
You
a
asked,
question?
we got plenty, but
I gotta head out in a minute. Okay. Well, another thing that obviously is discussed a lot is the water situation, and Mike, I know your stance pretty well. I think you're not happy with it and want to see a different solution to it, but I haven't talked to you too much about it yet, so I guess I'll start with you. What do you think about the water? What would you like to do on the council? And then obviously then we'll give you a chance to talk about it as well.
So the water issue remains a point of conversation throughout the community. As I've gone around talking to people, it's brought up numerous times. So the good news is there is a solution to it. And we know how much it's going to cost. It's between $18 and $20 million. The challenge is we have a 2014 survey that was done that indicated people weren't willing to pay between $10 and $15 per month additional. So now we've got a data point from the citizens that's saying one thing, and we got complaints from the citizens on the other side. So I guess my view on it is it's really a matter of economics and saying are people willing to pay for it? Now we've got a problem in the community because those that have the wherewithal to pay for it, they absolutely 100% want the improvements made. They want a precipitate system put in. They're willing to pay for it. The problem is we've got a large segment of the community that doesn't have the economic wherewithal. So now the question becomes, what do we do about that? And so I think that I would be supportive of a scientific survey that made sure that we got all of the community surveyed, or at least representative portions of the survey economically, to make sure that we get feedback on whether that's the right thing to do or not. But it's as I go around and doorbell, it's easy to see which group of people will be supportive of it and which ones are not in position. I'll say another thing. We've got the school bond issue, which I hope approved as it gets approved. However, that's going to be an impact on homeowners and also those that landlords. So there's already increases. We've got all kinds of things where we need money for. So the question somewhat becomes one of is it broad enough support in the community at all economic levels that this is the highest priority where we want to spend our money, or are there other things we would rather do with our money?
What's your personal opinion on the water?
I think it depends. It's a really complex issue because it depends on what location you are. For example, obviously it tests well at the wellhead, but depending on where you are and how much water flows through where you are, it will determine whether or not you have issues with the water, because the age of the piping or the type of piping, how long the water sits if you're at the end of the deadline. In my particular location, I don't have a particular problem. I would not be willing to pay more for it, but if the community wanted it, we would certainly do it if it was done with a scientific kind of survey.
Mike, your shot.
So
it's a split for many households. Some people, as John kind of alluded to, are they find the water to be okay. Others have real issues with it. We have children and families in our community suffering health impacts from our water. That's not acceptable. We have had individuals have their appliances damaged and destroyed, residential customers as well as business customers, and that's not acceptable. We have to find a solution. There are some other solutions that are continuing to be explored. We can't forget, we do have a partner in this, and that's the Beacon Hill Water Sewer District as a partner in this decision making. It's not completely the city of Longview or our customers, but it's also Beacon Hill that has some input on this as well. I prefer, and I have an option that I prefer, and that's to use reverse osmosis as a treatment process at the treatment plant. It is expensive, and it will be expensive to maintain long term, and it will be an increase in rates to our customers. What I'm hearing from our customers is they're having bottled water delivered now, and they are buying bottled water in bulk. If you go to any one of our local grocers, you see the water distribution that's happening from our local grocers, and there's a fair amount of harm being done as a result with these plastic bottles, by the way. It's not good. We shouldn't be using this much plastic. So there's a much broader concern. Yes, the water is important. We need to perfect the water and make it as the most acceptable water that we can afford. But there's some other concerns that happen too. By the way, the council has expedited, increased our water main replacement. When we heard the concerns, when we learned, and the city learned that we had problems with the water mains because of the reverse flow, we've increased our investments there. In the pump stations, we've increased our investments there. We've also moved forward with this dissolved oxygen injection process with the support of Beacon Hill Water Sewer there too, with the hope to address the oxidation reduction potential of the water and basically level and balance the need of chlorine. Because one of the complaints we have is the taste and the odor of chlorine in the water. And so many customers, depending where you're at in the network, have that experience. And so by we're moving forward to that dissolved oxygen injection, we're hoping to balance that system. It's not true that the water coming out of the spigot at the treatment plant is acceptable, by the way. It maintains and it contains that silica content that is the biggest gripe of many of our customers, right? But what you'll find, if you study this issue and have been involved with this issue, is the distribution network basically works in a 3-day phase. There's a 1-day phase, a 2nd day, and a 3rd-day phase of how the water distributes throughout the network. And what you'll find is the Beacon Hill Water Sewer customers have a very different experience with their water than Longview customers do. And they often don't even realize that they're drinking the same water that Longview customers are drinking. And they have a different experience. And there's one distinct factor, and that is the main reservoir where the water goes and sits before it's distributed back down to Beacon Hill. And so there is some additional exploration that has to be done. This isn't going to be solved overnight. Yes, dissolved oxygen is helpful to address that odor and taste issue related to chlorine. Reverse osmosis will be helpful too, but it's a very expensive option, and many customers and many family members in our community are barely getting by. I am very concerned about the ability to pay for reverse osmosis. But what we've seen is the bottled water cost. You know, people are buying water and they're not even giving their pets. They're putting bottled water in the dishes for their pets. My family bathes in the water, we drink the water, we use the water. That's how we live. But my job is not to just look out for myself. But when I have the whole community, residents up in arms, all across demographics, all across the neighborhoods, in vast different areas, all complaining about the same issue, then we have a problem that we have to address. And we're continuing to make improvements on that. In my time in office, we've also restored the Water Operating Board. Interestingly, at some point, the Water Operating Board, which is made up of Longview council members and a Beacon Hill commissioner, was unilaterally eliminated by staff. No longer needed, discontinued, just stopped meeting. The Water Operating Board is that group that's important to bring the liaisons together from Longview and Beacon Hill to talk about these issues and work out these issues. And it was done away with. In the last couple of years, we got it back together and said, look, these are important issues, we need to be communicating. We've built our relationships. We've had a number of meetings with Beacon Hill Water Sewer District as a result. We're continuing to improve that relationship because when it comes time to make an investment like reverse osmosis, we have to have the whole community involved and on board, and we have some customers who are satisfied in both Beacon Hill and in Longview. And John mentioned that. Some people are satisfied.
What do you think about the idea of a scientific study?
We've authorized, council has authorized a survey. In fact,
so you would do that before voting on anything?
Earlier this year, council gave direction to the city manager to include a survey in our utility billing statements, in fact. This is, again, we go back to the council manager role of government. Council gives direction to the manager. We follow up.
Thank you for your time. I gotta head out. Yeah, I think we're getting.
Thank you.
I was gonna wrap up. Is that fine? Okay. Yeah. So
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just give you guys the last couple of minutes and say why should voters choose you over your opponent? What is the main ways that you will be a better council member? And I'm particularly interested to hear you say kind of address. Michael said multiple times that you haven't been there and you are just getting involved now. So I'm curious to hear what your response to that charge would be.
I think, I can accept that criticism, but as being the individual that has worked for 38 years with a long commute, that being involved in the city has just not been possible for me, other than I was involved with United Way as a board member, and I was also a soccer coach for many years. But I accept that criticism. The issue, though, is I think Mike does things at times that are good, and he mentioned many things. The problem, though, is he has been divisive to the community, and that is a problem for our community. We have a city council position here that is there's no need for it to be as divisive as it is. And I don't know if you pick up with that with the community members. There's a whole bunch of people that are very upset with the way you have conducted yourself in office. And if it wasn't for that, I might not be running against you. But that is critical to me in your behaviors. So that's a driver. But in terms of why should people vote for me, I'll start off with my values. It's integrity, honesty, and hard work. Those are things that I believe about myself, but they are also things that my coworkers would say about me, people that have worked with me would say about me, my friends would say about me. I also am independent. I don't have any allegiances to city staff or city council members.
It's just not true, John. It's not true. You're not being honest.
Well, you can say that, but so city council members, city contractors, agency heads, realtors, developers. I don't have those relations. My only interest in running for this office is to do what's right for the city and be trustworthy, fair, honest, and transparent. And then I'll go back to my background. I have, from my years as a Marine Corps officer, through my years as an engineer, project manager, I've got the skill sets, the technical knowledge, the background that fits in the wheelhouse of what the city does. And I think I would be an asset to the city in the city council role. And I understand the role of a city council member versus that of a city manager. And that's the kind of thing that I would bring to this role.
John, earlier in our interview, you had talked about not being associated with other candidates and not running as a block. That was one of your criticisms of me. You're out knocking on doors and doorbelling and wearing the campaign buttons and distributing the literature of the other candidates that are running with you. Often you're seen with the buttons of your Democrat colleagues running for office. You have paid Democrat operatives that are working on your behalf. You've been seen and photographed in association with certain city employees and associated with them. It's just not true, John. And when you're running on your integrity and trust and honesty and all this, come on. It's just not true. Look, I'm the best candidate for this position because it is a job. And I show up every day, and I show up and actually do my job and do my duty and follow through based on what the residents expect from me. I don't always agree with the residents and what they want from me and the timeline that they expect the city to respond, but it is a job. And I've tried to share, Andre and with Rose, some of the examples of that with you, the needs and wants of members of the community and what their expectations of our council, to be a liaison and to be an advocate and to take an active role. Yes, there is a clear line in a council manager form of government, the relationship between the council and the manager staff. And John may be certainly well qualified for some engineering jobs and leadership jobs, and it sounds like he certainly would be. But he's not running for a management position on this council. Sounds like he'd be a great member of staff. He calls me a micromanager. The truth is, he might even be a better manager, a better micromanager, a bigger micromanager than I could ever be, with his managerial experience managing hundreds of employees and big budgets. I'm just an advocate. My job is to respond to the residents. I'm very active and very engaged and very visible in the community, and people share with me their frustrations and their concerns and their wants and their hopes for this community, and it's my job to balance those with what we can afford and balance those with what we can live with in our community. I don't always get my way, the residents don't always get our way, but it's what the best possible outcome with the least impacts and the least harm for the most amount of people and the least cost, and it's a way of just finding some balance. And I've been doing that, and our council has been doing that, and we've been making improvements. And if you look around the community, you can see the improvements. And if the staff had such a hard time with me, I wouldn't have earned the endorsement of the Longview professional firefighters. They don't just give that away, an endorsement like that. You earn that. You earn that through trust. You earn that through relationship buildings. John's challenge is about my associations with department heads or this or that. That's part of doing the job effectively. When somebody calls me with a concern about a process or a question or this or that, even my detractors, even the people who would rather me not see reelected, I happily meet with them in person. I happily go to them and hear their arguments and hear their concerns. And if I can find a way to be helpful, I do, because it's a job. It's part of the job. And I take it very seriously. And I'm very passionate about this. And I think we have a same goal. We want the best Longview possible. And I would love to have John on a board or a commission. I think he'd be very effective if he wanted to volunteer in some way in the city. I think he could contribute a lot in many ways. But this council needs an advocate for our community. And that's me.
Do you have anything else? I think we do need to wrap it up. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope you guys felt like you had a chance to air your differences and state that. I don't want you to leave anything off the table. Does everybody feel like they had a chance to speak completely? Mike?
Yeah.
John?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming in, and good luck in the race. Just kind of, you're writing